I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise. If we had any doubts over whether or not Jesus knew exactly who he was or what he'd come to this earth to do, this statement, I think, blows those doubts away. Jesus knew he was heading back home to heaven, and he knew he'd been given the authority to invite others to join him there. And if we were at all confused about what it is which qualifies us to enter heaven, then that confusion is also surely dealt with by these words and the circumstances in which they were said. It is clearly not good behavior which gets us into heaven. The man Jesus said these words to was a convicted criminal, openly accepting his guilt for wrongdoing. But of course, that's the point. He was confessing his sin and his guilt to Jesus and putting his faith in Jesus to somehow deal with that. Remember me when you come into your kingdom, he said. What exactly he meant by those words, it's hard to be sure of, but clearly he believed Jesus was no ordinary man, that he was someone with some kind of authority from God, both in this life and the next. And that very simple confession and statement of faith was enough to book his place in heaven. I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. Another thing which becomes obvious from the context of these words is that right up to the last moment of our lives, an invitation to heaven is on offer. This man on the cross next to Jesus had only hours, maybe even minutes to live. But that wasn't the important thing. The important thing was that he'd found a moment, this moment, during his life to make his peace with God through Jesus. Someone once said, although I can't remember who it was, when asked the question, what is the meaning of life? Answered, the meaning of life is to find out the meaning of life. And I believe that all of us have opportunities in life to do that. Opportunities which we need to take to make our peace with God. So let's look at the actual words of this statement in a bit more detail. Jesus says first, I tell you the truth. I tell you the truth. And Jesus often began speaking to his audiences with those words. And it's one reason why the crowds did flock to him, because he spoke with authority, as he does here. Truth can be hard to find these days, can't it? We live in a world where false information seems to be proliferating. And it's actually a little bit frightening, I think. We've been through an amazing period in history where communication between people in the world has become so much easier. And to some degree, it's helped the world come together and us to understand each other better. But now it seems to be going in the opposite direction. There's so much information and so many different voices to listen to that we have to be selective in what we hear. And the danger being that in doing so, we become narrow and blinkered again in our search for the truth. Well, the world may have changed and methods of communication changed greatly since Jesus walked this earth, but still he says to us, I tell you the truth. And millions today, far, far more than ever could do when Jesus walked among us. Millions believe that he does speak the truth. I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. Today. It's going to happen straight after we've got through this excruciatingly painful experience together on the cross. And here we come to one of those theological conundrums. How do we square this statement and teaching with teaching elsewhere in the New Testament, which speaks of a great day still in the future when Jesus will return and then the resurrection of the dead will happen? I think it's simply our puny human brains which are just unable to comprehend such things. After death, we step from a life which is bound by time into an eternity which is outside of time. So what does today actually mean in that scenario? Life will be just one long day, won't it? Maybe. Or maybe it's just that after death we'll be effectively sleeping until that last day comes. I don't really know. But what I do believe is that after I die, the next thing I will know is that I will be with Jesus. And that's enough for me. And I think that's the kind of reassurance Jesus was giving to that man beside him on the cross. Today, you will be with me in paradise. You will. It reminds me of a verse that appears twice later in the New Testament. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And God wants us to have that level of assurance about our long-term future, guaranteed for us through faith in Jesus. Because if we do have such assurance about the next life, it will make a world of difference to us in this life. Not only giving us a sense of peace in our hearts, but also giving us the determination to go all out for God in this life, out of gratitude for what he's done and what he's promised, but also because we won't be driven by a desperate need to make the most of this life in terms of getting as much pleasure out of it as we can, which can so easily turn into an all-consuming but ultimately disappointing way of life. Instead, we can be content to expend much of our effort on serving God and serving one another, which in any case, I believe, results in a much more satisfying life. I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. You will be with me, Jesus says. And I've already touched on the fact that that's such an attractive prospect, going to be with God in heaven, the God we see in Jesus, the beautiful person we see in Jesus. He will be our eternal companion, the one who cares for us. What more could we want from paradise? Paradise. The original meaning of that word is garden. It's used in the Bible in particular, of course, to describe the Garden of Eden, that idyllic place where in the beginning people did live with God. Well, at the end of the Bible, that same word appears again, but now describing a future dwelling place for mankind, and once again with God. What will it be like? I don't know. We don't know in any detail. It's another thing I think our puny human brains can't really comprehend yet. The Bible gives us some lovely images, though, to describe heaven to us. A great mansion, a great banquet, a golden city, somewhere good, certainly. My way of looking at it is to ask people to imagine, to think about the place where you would most like to be. Even now, where would you most of all like to be? Maybe it's a glorious sandy beach somewhere relaxing. Or it might be walking among some glorious mountain scenery. Well, it could be at Wembley, watching a cup final, cheering with the crowds. Or maybe it's at home, being surrounded by our family. Could be all kinds of places that we would most love to be. Well, think about that. Think about what it would feel like to be there, and believe that heaven will be even better than that. That, I think, is how we can get something in our imaginations about what heaven will be. So in conclusion, when Jesus says to those who put their faith in him, I tell you the truth, you will be with me today in paradise. He wants us first to believe his words, giving us confidence for the future. Secondly, he wants us to live these words, committing ourselves to his way of life in readiness for what will come next. And thirdly, he wants us to share these words through compassion to those who do not yet believe them and believe in him.